So I sat through 100 different movies in 2022, and I wrote little micro reviews of each one on my Letterboxd. You can find that in the description. And make sure you throw your boy a follow while you're there. You know, maybe like the video too. All right, but anyway, I've never done anything like this before where I was tracking my movies this diligently. And so I wanted to talk about like my initial roadblocks and how I overcame each one. The reason why I got to tracking how many movies I watched is because it's something I've always wanted to do.
I can do what it is I've always wanted to do.
But I was just too lazy to start. And at the time, I didn't think Letterboxd was going to fill the need. I just wanted a space to keep track of the movies I hadn't seen. And so I started to use Letterboxd and realized that all right, I actually kind of like it. I was clowning on it for so long because I thought it wasn't that good in the UI. This video is not sponsored, by the way, but Letterboxd, if you do want to sponsor me, hit me up. But yeah, one of my worries was that I wanted to log non-Hollywood movies, and because I watched a lot of movies in different languages and from like different regions, and so I was worried regional cinema wouldn't show up and it was just Hollywood movies on Letterboxd. It was super naive of me to think that, but you know what? It's good to be proven wrong in a good way. You know, I'm okay being wrong with that. And another thing that was holding me back was that I couldn't remember exactly when I watched each movie. Like, because some of these movies were like from a long time ago. I'm not going to remember that, hey, I watched that movie on December 12th, 2017. Like, I don't remember that. So I just said, screw it. I just wrote a review for the movies that I had seen already and just said I watched it that same day I wrote the review. And then anything that I actually watched in 2022, I just tagged with wait for it, watched in 2022 tag. And so that made it a lot easier for me to keep up my logging because I felt like everything was complete and there's less friction with making reviews of just movies I remembered. And another thing that made my movie going habits possible was the fact that I was on AMC A-List. Again, not sponsored, but if AMC wants to sponsor me in the future, hit your boy up. But yeah, it was convenient because I could watch 3 movies a week in any format. So that's like IMAX, Dolby, etc. And I made sure I got my money's worth every month. I got a chance to see The Godfather in all its glory in theaters, which was great. I also went to a couple of different theaters like the Coolidge Theater in Boston, where I saw movies such as 2001: A Space Odyssey, Drive My Car, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. All those movies were insane. I loved them, and I loved it there. The atmosphere was A1. Having seen so many films, let me just say that the Nicole Kidman AMC pre-roll ad haunts me. I pretty much know it word for word, bar for bar.
I pretty much know every word.
Bar for bar.
I could recite it perfectly in my sleep.
We come to this place for magic. Dazzling images. Somehow, heartbreak feels good in a place like this.
And so with that being said, so here were some of my favorite 2022 releases. The first one is Kantara, and the title roughly translates to Mystical Forest, and it's a Kannada or sandalwood film. The director, the lead actor is Rishabh Shetty, and I think him and the whole production crew did a really good job in like just making every frame from the beginning to the end so rich and impactful, and some really good storytelling, and takes a simple premise but does it so well. You know, they execute it to perfection, and the cinematography, the lighting, the sound design, everything just worked together. Even the acting, the ensemble cast feels lively, like you're actually in that village. And so they're able to capture something that I feel not many films are able to capture. And it's great because you can see every single bit of thoughtfulness that goes into every shot in this film. It's simple, but it's rich. And I just think that the cinematography in particular, the little pans, the little zoom-ins, the little instances of the vertigo effect, it's all just so fresh. It feels good to watch, and it's exciting. And it excited me in a way that other films this year didn't necessarily do, even though they were people were over the moon about them. And I felt a lot more with this movie than other films like RRR, which were
extremely hyped up. And I think that when it comes to my favorite movies, they tend to be ones that are able to capture something and that makes you experience something completely different and sort of transports you in a way. And so I feel like when I watch movies, I'm like chasing that special feeling that only few movies will ever give you. And that's not to say I don't enjoy the other movies. It's just that some films will stand head and shoulders above the rest. And Kantara did that for me. It excelled at tapping into the numinous. It was grounded, but provided a spiritual layer to itself that respected its subject and took it seriously. And there are few films that come out and have that sort of impact where you just think, oh my God, I love cinema. It's evoked that for me, for which I am really grateful for. So definitely give it a shot. I wanted to start my recommendations off with this movie because I wanted you to see this first instead of like the same 3 or 4 other films that everyone else always recommends. Yeah, this is my gift to you. Definitely, it's a film worth your time, it's worth your while, and it deserves more eyeballs. So go check it out. Next up, we have Everything Everywhere All at Once, and that one is such a great movie. It's near impossible to abbreviate, but I still love it. We got A24 being A24, and it's the Daniels, so it's a wild ride from start to finish. Michelle Yeoh, Tae Hai Kwan, and Stephanie Su are spectacular. I feel like they really added something to this movie. Their performances were great. There's so much creativity in this, and while I may not have been such a huge fan of some creative decisions, even then they were able to make it work well, and it like factored into the plot in a realistic or grounded for the cinema universe kind of way. And so there are a lot of hilarious moments, and it really takes you through a whole like emotional journey. Like you go through the full spectrum from happiness to fear, to sadness, to disgust. Oh my gosh. And it's just an amusing experience from start to finish. And I think this movie is one that definitely is best served by watching it in a packed theater. That was my only like qualm about it, is that like I don't find myself wanting to revisit this movie or rewatch this movie, because watching it with just a couple of like really cool people is just like an unparalleled experience. And so even the first time I was watching it, I was like, wow, this is a lot of movie. But it's like, it feels like it ends 5 times before it actually ends. And it still felt like a good movie. So I enjoyed the fact that it sets up all these little subplots or these little things, these little vignettes, if you will, and then finds a way to find a satisfying conclusion, or builds up to that crescendo. And you're just like, wow, what an experience. It's an extremely clippable movie. Like you can make clips of it, and I will rewatch those clips endlessly. But yeah, it's just a movie that you should share with others, watch together, that kind of thing. And it's good for friend groups. I'm glad this movie eventually legged it out to become A24's top grossing movie, which is phenomenal. We love to see it. Check out Everything Everywhere All at Once. My next movie is Top Gun Maverick. No amount of B-roll clips that I put here will do this movie justice in terms of the visceral feeling from watching the action unfold on an IMAX screen. This was possibly one of my favorite movies to come out this year because it just is so thrilling. It pretty much breathed life into the Top Gun universe. If you get 2 movies, you're a universe now. I don't make the rules. I'm sorry. But yeah, it felt like a continuation from the original with just some like stylistic upgrades, and they all work. The aerial stunts and maneuvers that they pull off in those planes, like that's practical effect gold. You want to see stuff like that. Well, I want to see stuff like that. That's why I'm rating it so high. But that will make the movie's effects and everything, it'll look really gorgeous from today, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Another thing is that the storytelling is just so efficiently done, and it's hard to believe that Paramount was sitting on this movie like pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and they came out at the right time because they knew they had a smash hit on their hands
So kudos to like Tom Cruise and the entire team behind this film, because they seem to understand what it means to really love cinema and really make sure that you get like the right take, the perfect shot, and what it takes to get that. And this movie, it shows that passion. So Cruise really brought it. Miles Teller also plays Rooster, did a great job. The ensemble cast, they get their individual moments and it doesn't feel like it drags on any one of them. So I think that works well because the movie's mostly about Maverick and Rooster, and everything else serves to play around that. So it simplifies things, and that's why it's executed so well. There's not a wasted character or a moment. It really felt like another classic cinema type of movie. So I love tracking the box office on this film because it was like a once in a decade type run until like, you know, Avatar came out. But yeah, it was a solid thing. Huge opening weekend, about 100 million coming out of the pandemic, and it somehow manages to leg out all the way to 718 million. And that's below only movies like Endgame, Avatar, and Star Wars. So that's insanely impressive. I think it ended at 1.4 or 1.5 billion worldwide. That's awesome. This is a movie made for the big screen. And speaking of the big screen, how could I continue without talking about Avatar, The Way of Water? No other film this year came this close to the visual spectacle and sheer jaw-dropping imagery that Avatar, The Way of Water had. And it's like one of those movies where you see, like, yes, they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this movie and years to bring this to us. And on screen, you're thinking, yep, that's every penny of it.
I'm the money.
Every penny of it.
It's an IMAX experience that simply blows all other visual experiences out of the water, pun intended. And I loved how Cameron was not only able to jump forward with the technology and do stuff with like experimental with the 24 frames per second and 48 frames per second stuff, because it looked great when it was like hitting on screen. I'm like, wow, this actually looks so real. The CGI looks better. The 3D is more palatable. It's great. So the whole production crew responsible for this film, great job, because they had to expand the scope of the story to not only like sort of soft relaunch Pandora and then like introduce all these new characters, and they're all motion caps. And it's so great because you're able to see their relationships and their dynamics unfold over the 3-hour runtime. And personally, I thought the pacing was still pretty spot on because Cameron wasn't afraid of letting those moments live and breathe. Whereas some people would say, oh, you know, that middle part was kind of draggy. But you know what? It was actually kind of awesome watching a nature documentary of Pandora, because, you know, you would think, okay, I'm used to the 3D and the beauty of this whole planet by now. And the next shot would be like the most photorealistic, fantastic looking thing that you've ever seen. And the final hour of this movie is just extremely competent action blockbuster filmmaking. And James Cameron really brings it. You have just some really wonderful stuff. Each character serves a purpose, and that's especially important considering the scope of this movie, because you're opening it up not just to the main characters of the first one, but also their family. And they have their individual motives, and they have their own feelings, and the way they interact with each other is done in a well enough way where you feel like, wow, like there's some tension, there's some conflict, and it arises naturally within this self-contained story. There is definitely room for us to explore more of Pandora and more of stories going forward. So I can't wait for Avatar 3, 4, and 5. Bring on those sequels. Give him all the money he needs to make them. And as for my number 5 pick, it's difficult to pick one, but let's just say that these movies were pretty cool. So yeah.
Editing Ishan here. Actually, after I made this video, I saw Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and I'm choosing that as my number 5 pick. The story is to the point and effective. The message is thoughtful, the characters were memorable, and the animation is gorgeous. Kudos to the animation team. Okay, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button and like the video, and I'll see you in the next one, my friends.